Hello and welcome to the Random Wrestling Review, and it is our local to global series today. And this is going to be a little bit of a different episode. And the reason I say that is that what I am doing on screen is not necessarily going to relate quite so much to what I'm saying now, because basically what happened here is I recorded the whole episode as I always do, and for whatever reason, the audio became corrupted. And so all the stuff that I said during this episode was you couldn't hear it. You kind of could, but it was so bad, and I couldn't honestly, in all good faith, put it out. So what you'll see is me now kind of commenting on what I'm doing, in a way that I've never done before, and is a little bit strange. And you can see I'm bringing up random pages here, there, and everywhere. I can't even remember the order in which I brought these pages up, so apologies for that. But anyway, that being said, one of the screens I did look at was the event screen, where I showed everybody that I put in an event which was called um, Fine Margins, which is the next event we're going to do, which will be headlined by Dan Severn versus Shawn Stasiak. And that's why I was showing you the rankings there, to show you that Shawn Stasiak is the new number one contender. And that is as a consequence of Severn defeating Barry Buchanan at Fighting Spirit 3, our last event, which is actually a really, really good show. Had some really good stuff in it, not least the best match in company history, as Red Alert defeated the Powers of Pain to retain the Northwest Tag Team titles. We also had Buddy Wayne defeat CM Punk by stoppage. That was to basically work in CM Punk's real life injury and give them a way to tell a new chapter in their story with each other. We also had Dave Batista defeat Ace Steel by disqualification when Mark Henry came in, attacked Dave Batista, and then after the match, Ace Steel offered Mark Henry a place in the Rebellion, but Henry declined and said that he is done with being managed. So Mark Henry is off the leash and is now out there on his own with nobody to stop him and his apparent rage that he's had throughout most of his time in the Random Wrestling Review. But yeah, today's event, such as it is going to be interesting, because it is, first of all, it's going to be headlined by Stasiak versus Severn for the title. But also we've got a number of other matches on the show to bring you as well. Looking forward to doing that as we speak. And what I'm doing right now is putting in the fact that I'm delaying the lottery brawl. So usually, or historically, that has been in April. We're going to schedule it for May this year, and that is because we are adding two new events to the calendar, and they are going to be two nights of a new tournament in the calendar that will take place in March. And I just thought, actually, I don't want two one-off events and achievements to take place 1 month after the other. So that's why I've pushed the lottery brawl back to May. The new tournament is going to be called the Golden Triangle Tournament. As I said, it's going to take place over 2 days in March. I will talk to you a little bit more about that later on in this episode, but that is what's going to be coming in the next episode, is potentially the 2 days of the Golden Triangle Tournament. And I think it's going to be a really cool addition to our calendar. So yeah, I'm just putting that in right now. Now, I should also apologize, actually, because the recording started 2 weeks after where I left you last time around. And that's because I'd already had some issues with the recording prior to the one the sound didn't work for. And I'd started recording, and then for whatever reason, it just wasn't capturing what I was doing. And so all I did really was progress those 2 weeks. There was nothing else that I actually did in that time, other than add the event, the Fine Margins event. And that was all I did. Haven't signed anybody new for the roster for this episode. And actually, I was thinking about this during the periods between episodes. I don't think that I'm in a position where I feel the need to add anybody to the roster at the moment. I'm really quite comfortable with where we are. There might be a couple of guys on the roster where I'm a bit like, well, maybe you know in the next 3 or 4 months, one or two of them might be surplus to requirements. We might be kind of done with what they have to bring. But in general, I'm pretty happy with where the roster is. I feel like I've got at least short-term plans for nearly everybody on it. Everybody seems to be doing something or has something that I've got coming up for them. And so Where I would see potentially new arrivals coming is not for another 3 or 4 months, possibly after the Super Summer Tag Team Extravaganza, which has again historically been a time of the year which is sort of prone to new arrivals. But that's kind of the way I'm feeling at the moment. And again, I'm just looking through the rankings here to show the roster, and yeah, as I said, I'm pleased with the roster. I'm also quite happy with where everyone is in the rankings. I feel like it's all falling nicely into place. I think sometimes it's just a quirk of this ranking system. Anyway, CW Anderson versus Ace Steel will be the first match on this show. We're going to give a victory to Ace Steel in this one. Probably a tainted win, was it? Did I give him a tainted win? Can't even remember now. Apologies for that. Um, no, looks like Ace Steel's going to get a victory without having to cheat to get it. Um, yeah, I mean Ace Steel's creeping up as well in those rankings, so that was another thinking behind that, is that Ace Steel's continue to try to move up the rankings. We're also going to have Dave Batista here against against Barry Buchanan. We had James Storm last time, didn't we? Dave Batista versus Barry Buchanan. This will be a match. This was actually a rematch from the main event of last year's Fighting Spirit, where Batista was still champion and he defended against Buchanan. And for this one, I think Batista's going to win. They're going to go storytelling. These two tend to do pretty well with storytelling, or at least that's my memory of some of their matches in the past. So that is another contest on this show. And after the match, Dave Batista is going to get into a feud with into a brawl with Mark Henry. So what's going to happen here is, as Dave Batista's leaving following the victory over Barry Buchanan, Mark Henry is going to be entering for his match, and then the pair are going to kind of exchange a few angry words across from one another, and then head straight towards each other and start to fight and go into a big brawl, which is eventually broken up by officials and referees and whatnot. And that's happening between these two matches, as I say, as as Batista leaves, Henry enters, and they end up brawling. Then we're going to have Mark Henry's match, and he's going to be against James Storm. Now, this is heel versus heel. Now, partially this was done because we've got a babyface versus babyface contest in the main event, and we would therefore have an imbalance between the heels and faces that I was able to book. But also, actually, I figured this made some sense. This I think might even be one of the very first heel versus heel matches I've ever booked for the Random Wrestling Review. Certainly, there have not been many, even if there has been one or two in the past. And the idea here is that basically, as we know, the Hart family, Bruce Hart, does not want James Storm to rise up the ranks. That's kind of been in a sort of part of our canon, and that's because James Storm, his contract runs and is guaranteed until the end of July, but at that point, Bruce Hart has no intention of re-signing him due to the fact that due to the fact that James Storm reneged on his promise to leave the Random Wrestling Review should he lose to Kid Chaos all the way back at the, I think, third anniversary show, which is in 1998 now. So a long, long time before this. There's been a long tail to that storyline. And what's going to happen here is that Batista's going to come in and interfere against Mark Henry as the finish, to yeah, so basically Batista's going to come in and cost Mark Henry the match. So even though Bruce Hart put James Storm in the match with Mark Henry, thinking this would be a, a really difficult match for James Storm to get the victory, actually Bruce Hart's plans have been scuppered by the fact that Batista interfered. And I realized that all that description made it sound like Batista, if you hadn't been listening to this, um, if you hadn't been listening to this series, it made it sound like, sorry, Bruce Hart is the heel in this story, but that's not actually the case. Bruce Hart is the baby face in this story, and I just um, you just have to have the context of what's gone before to understand why James Storm is the heel in this one. Now, the next match, the penultimate match of the show, actually, we're only going to have 5 matches on this event, is a 4-way tag team match to determine the next number one contenders to the tag team titles. So obviously, currently, Charlie Haas and CW Anderson, Red Alert, hold those tag belts and had a great match, the best in company history, as I mentioned earlier, with the Powers of Pain at Fighting Spirit. Well, Keith Hart and Teddy Hart, Rex King and Chris Adams, the Samoan Violence Connection, and Buddy Wayne and Billy Kidman are going to line up against one another in this 4-way match. Obviously, Buddy Wayne and Billy Kidman. Buddy Wayne is Billy Kidman's mentor. Keith and Teddy Hart are uncle and nephew combination. Rex King and Chris Adams just defeated Billy Kidman and Teddy Hart in a tag team match on the last show, and the Samoan Violence Connection are the previous tag team champions. And you've seen there a couple of warnings by Pat Patterson around the ability for a couple of the wrestlers in the match to go for as long as 15 minutes, but whatever, I've decided to ignore them, and I'm hoping that the bulk of individuals that are in the match make up for it, and basically it's not a problem, but we'll see. And then the main event, Dan Severn versus Shawn Stasiak for the title. This one is going to be won yet again by Dan Severn. He's going to have another successful title defense in what has been a title defense where he's very quickly racked up a load of victories, and now almost Dave Batista's record number of title defenses is in kind of play, is under threat from Dan Severn's title reign. And yeah, we're going to have Dan Severn win it. I realized that the screen has kind of gone still for a moment. I'm probably thinking about what I'm going to do here, how I'm going to finish this match. So Dan Severn's going to win the match, but he's going to do it. I think what we're going to do is we're going to do it by a flash pinfall finish, because just to amp up the idea, this was, as you know, that Dan Severn has won nearly all of these matches by submission and won them decisively. But on this occasion, I'm going to have Dan Severn win it by a flash pinfall finish, just to amp up Stasiak's general level of frustration, as we have been doing. And then after the match, it's finally happening. Shawn Stasiak is going to turn heel. He's going to attack Dan Severn in a rage at having lost his title shot. And of course, losing a title match in my universe, because of my ranking system, really makes a difference, because you really you'll drop to the bottom of the rankings, right? So losing a title match is actually a major happening in your career. It sets you back as much as a year in terms of your progress towards the title. So Stasiak, frustrated by his loss, attacks Dan Severn. Now I'm expecting this not to do well, because of the issue we've got that we saw last time, the warning message, where basically we've been running this story for too long. The sort of preparation of Stasiak's heel turn, and the fans were getting a little bit bored of it. So I'm a little bit concerned that this won't be the success I was hoping for, but we'll see what happens in the show itself. But this is where it's finally happening. Shawn Stasiak is going to attack Dan Severn, and yeah, it's going to be it's finally happening. I think it's been sort of 7, 8, 9 months time since we kind of initiated this heel turn, and finally we are going to pay it off. I was just checking the storylines there to see if there's anything I needed to do in terms of, progressing them or not. I think I decided here that the emergence of the rebellion story could continue, because the last time it was advanced was in the last show, so I didn't think I needed to do anything to um, move it along at this event. Obviously, Dan Severn and Shawn Stasiak, the storyline was put together specifically to run this show, so that's fine. Rex King and Billy Kidman is serviced by the four-way tag team match. I decided to bring an end to this story because it is over now. Red Alert versus Samoan Violence Connection. The Mark Henry anger management story is finished, and is continuing, and will continue with the with the Mark Henry Batista stuff we've got on the show. And CM Punk was against Buddy Wayne at the last show, and therefore doesn't need to be updated. And by the way, CM Punk is selling his injuries. That's why he's not on this show. Is that the idea that he's still injured thanks to what happened for his last match to end by stoppage. You also have noticed there that I removed Bill Alfonso from the story, Mark Henry anger management story, because we decided to leave it. We decided that's going to be the end for Bill Alfonso, and indeed I'm going to release him after this event. So it's time to go into RWR fine margins then, and we have another crowd of 108 people in Northwest here, which is the same attendance we've had for the last couple of matches actually. This had great heat and good wrestling, and Ace Steel won in 9:37 by pinfall, a segment rating of 38, despite both Anderson and Steel only having individual performances of 34, so the whole was better than the sum of its parts. In match 2, Dave Batista faced Barry Buchanan, got the victory in 10:44 by pinfall. Again, a segment rating of 38, despite Batista and Buchanan actually both having better performances than the previous two, participants in the previous match. Batista gets a victory over Buchanan. Then after the match, as Batista left the arena following his victory. Mark Henry emerges for his match. The two of them basically look at each other, share a couple of words with one another in anger, and then race towards each other and begin a big brawl, which is then broken up by officials. And Dave Batista is eventually prized away from Henry and forced away from ringside. Then the match itself, James Storm gets the victory in 11:34 by pinfall when Dave Batista comes out and hits Henry with a chair in the back, leaving him easy prey to a James Storm victory. This one got a segment rating of 34, which is a little bit disappointing, actually. Mark Henry only had an in-ring performance of 26, which is about the higher level of what he's done so far, and obviously still actually quite a green individual in terms of his wrestling skill. But James Storm, a rating of 42, and he couldn't get it up any higher than a 34 overall segment rating, which is a little bit disappointing, but nothing major for this one. Then we had the four-way tag team match. Rex King and Chris Adams overcoming Keith Hart and Teddy Hart, Samoa Violence Connection, and Buddy Wayne and Billy Kimmon in 13:54 when Chris Adams pinned Teddy Hart with a super kick. For a segment rating of 38, you can see here that Rex King had a rating of 40 and Chemo of 47, Billy Kimmon a 30, Buddy Wayne a 38, but overall they could only make this a 38 rated match. Rex King and Chris Adams become the number one contenders to the tag team title, a couple of matches in a row, which they've now won, and this victory puts them in pole position to face Red Alert the next time the tag team titles are defended. And this also had the additional bonus of advancing Rex King and Billy Kidman's storyline as we've gone. I was hoping for maybe a little bit better than this, given the numbers of people involved, but I guess there were a couple of wrestlers, Keith Hart and Chris Adams in particular, that just didn't have the stamina to keep a pace up for this match to be something special. So all that's left to do for this event is the main event then, and it is Dan Severn versus Shawn Stasiak, won by Severn, his 7th defense of the Northwest title. Remember, Batista had 10 defenses, but actually his title reign lasted a whole lot longer than Severn's has, so Severn's done it in a lot less time. And as you can see here, we got that message again. The fans are getting bored by the hints at a Shawn Stasiak heel turn. They want it to come about and happen already. The segment rating of 34, I was really disappointed with this, and I assume that the main reason for that is that boredom with those hints. But then after the match, Stasiak, frustrated by the loss of a title match, which will mean now he goes to the back of the queue for a title shot in the future, attacked Dan Severn from behind, leaving him lying, properly beating him down, and turning heel. The turn was compromised because we'd foreshadowed it for so long that the fans had actually grown bored of the whole saga, and that affected the surprise of the turn. But it was completed and it went pretty well. So it wasn't a disaster, which means Stasiak shouldn't be upset in terms of the fact that we've wasted this big heel turn for him. He should be okay with that. There should be no morale effects as a consequence. So I'm reasonably happy with it. To be honest, when I saw that warning the first time on the last event, I was concerned that we were gonna see that be a major disaster, that heel turn. But in the end, it was only okay, which wasn't what we were going for. We were hoping for that to be a really, really impactful, but we just left it going too long. I mean, ultimately, for me, it came down to the fact that I just didn't have the circumstance just didn't present itself in the way I wanted it to, and the way the story. I find when I'm booking, the stories kind of write themselves. I know it's a bit of a cliche in terms of when you're writing stories, but they do. Like it just feels like there's an obvious direction in which things go. And with Stasiak, I was just waiting for the moment where it would write itself into this heel turn. You can see here me looking at the top 100 and fine margins is way down in like the 18th of 64 events that we've done so far. So not massively low, but certainly by our recent form is pretty low in terms of its quality. In terms of the top 100 matches, I don't think there was a single one from that event in the top 20, which again is a rarity at the moment. The best one was the match between, can I even see it here? It is 40th position. Dave Batista and Barry Buchanan rating of 38. But there were a few matches that got a rating of 38, and you can see some of them are also here. But yeah, just the opportunity, the story that was, as I said, kind of writing itself, just never materialized for a heel turn for Shawn Stasiak before this point. And what's more, is that actually I was kind of thinking that there would be something else that happened. But again, the circumstances of the rest of the roster have kind of changed as well. Here I'm just showing you that Dan Severn now has 7 successful title defenses, and as I said, he's only 3 away now from equaling Batista's record. But interestingly enough, with the results going the way they did in this show, Batista's actually now the number 1 contender. So we might be not far away from a Dan Severn Dave Batista title match at some point in the next month or so. It wasn't his worst title defense actually for Dan Severn, but it was at the lower end of what he's been able to do. So this is me now looking at Shawn Stasiak. Everybody's happy there that he's not unhappy that he lost that heel turn wasn't as good as it might have been. Here I am releasing Bill Alfonso. I think it's time. Like, we brought him in to be the potential manager for Mark Henry. It didn't work. They didn't have the chemistry with one another, and so look, no regrets. He's out, and we move on from the Bill Alfonso failed experiment. In fact, just the failed experiment is not really Bill Alfonso. It is the Mark Henry having a manager was the failed experiment, because obviously it didn't work with Woman either. So Mark Henry now has no manager. Is going to basically go alone, and hopefully we can. Yeah, we can that can go well from then on. Just creating here as well the Golden Triangle Tournament title, which, as I said, is coming the next events. The next 2 events are going to be the Golden Triangle Tournament, and I'll talk a little bit about that now, I suppose. So the Golden Triangle Tournament, I'd actually thought about it, and when I thought about it, I got my maths wrong. So I thought what I would do is a tournament where all the matches were 3-way matches, and for some reason in my head, 18 wrestlers did that. But I realized that once I got through the first round and the semi-final, actually there would only be 2 wrestlers left. But I still decided I'm going to go with it. So basically, in order to have all 3-way matches throughout the tournament, I would need the tournament to be 27 men, in depth, and that just felt like too many. Just felt like too many wrestlers. So instead, what we're doing is we're going to have a first round where they're all 3-way matches, 6 3-way matches. Then we're going to have a semi-final where there are 2 3-way matches, and then the 2 winners of those go through to the final of the Triangle Tournament and will win the tournament overall. There's no additional bonuses for winning the tournament. You don't get any additional rankings points over and above the points that you accumulate as winning matches in the tournament. I very much want this to be more about the achievement of winning this tournament as it's a standalone achievement, rather than how it then relates back to the Northwest title and the rankings for that. But I think it's an interesting concept. It's a different way of looking at professional wrestling. Like, I like, if you're going to have individual unique sort of tournaments and events, there's got to be a reason they exist. So what I mean by that is, if you've got, let's say, a single elimination tournament, 16 wrestler single elimination tournament on your calendar in, say, March, to then have an 8-man single elimination tournament or a 32-man single elimination tournament later in the year feels pointless. You've already got a single elimination tournament in your calendar. So that's why I quite like the idea of having different types of tournaments. And this one just came to me as why don't we just do all the matches in 3-way? And that way it's almost like a different type of thing that people are trying to win. It's a different format of a tournament. So I'm just looking at what happened at Super Bowl 10 here with WCW. Again, though, just really not a good product at the moment. Scott Hall versus Chicky Star in the main event. No title on the line either. WCW just not in a very good place whatsoever. I mean, having said that, I think the headline matches there were better than where the rating for them was high. It was a higher number than their popularity in America, but all the same, it just feels like they are so far behind WWE in terms of both business and quality. Also, they're demonstrating the fact that we lost some money in February, quite a significant amount, and that's because of the money we spent on the Powers of Pain. I estimated it was about $2,600. So if we took that from our workers, if we took that from the amount there, we'd still be around about $800 having lost in the month. So, again, um, you know, wouldn't be too bad off. But saying that, I noticed that our sponsorship had gone down for the first time in the game's history, I think, and that's because the both the economy and the wrestling industry is still in a state of falling during this year, which means that we're just not receiving as much in sponsorship income as we have done in the past, which is a little bit of a concern given that we have been running the last couple of months as if with a bit of a deficit because I figured that the sponsorship money would actually catch up to the money we were spending. But if that continues, that trend continues where we're just not receiving quite the same amount of sponsorship as we might have done, that could become a problem. I'm not too worried about it. I think financially we're still in a pretty sound position, but it's just something for me to be wary of, to consider in the future, and maybe not in until that changes, not spend any more money on these kind of extravagant one-off appearances like we've had with the Powers of Pain, for example. So I'm just now progressing the game until the next uh, our next event, which is the uh, Golden Triangle tournament. And actually, what's going to happen here is I'm going to start booking the Triangle tournament, actually, because we're ready to do that. Before I do that, I might have a look at some of these events that are going on. It looks like here Bret Hart potentially staying with WWF. They are once again negotiating a contract. This is in March of 2000. So in reality, Bret had effectively retired by this point, but in the game world, which seems like a better world than the one we live in, Bret Hart will continue to wrestle into the new millennium. Meanwhile, ECW Living Dangerously 2000, the Sandman defeated Shane Douglas for the East to retain the ECW title, and the Cult of Gloom defeated El Bronco and Terry Funk in a cage match. 282 rated matches. And you compare that with the WCW pay-per-view we just saw, and you can see why WCW are in a bit more trouble than ECW. Like they just are not, their shows are just not as good as the shows being put on by ECW, and certainly not by WWE. So yeah, I'm going to start to book this show, and I'm going to reveal a couple of the matches that are going to happen in the first round. But what I've realized since recording actually is, honestly, this might change because I as I was booking this, I even though I'd planned out the tournament, I hadn't really thought too much about it. I'd done a random drawing actually of the wrestlers in the first round just to see what would happen if I did a random drawing, because I wasn't sure how I was going to determine who was going to face who in what matches. So I just did a random drawing, and then I was like, actually, I'm quite happy with that random drawing. I will just stick to it. I will just use it in the tournament. And then what I realized is that when I was booking it, that there were certain things I hadn't addressed that I wanted to, and in order to do that, I probably needed to change around some of the matches. So I think even though you're going to see me book, I think 3 matches in this episode, I think what's actually going to happen in reality is that things might move around a little bit. I know what I want to happen over the course of the tournament, but there might be just a slightly different route to get there. So as you can see here, first of all, I'm booking CM Punk, Keith Hart, and Chemo in a match, which CM Punk is going to win and to progress to the semi-final. Uh, and there will be 1 or 2 other matches here, as I said, that where I'm doing the same thing. I'm booking some people to go through to the semi-final. But as I say, that the actual end product that I end up booking might be different. And I don't get to the end of booking this show, by the way, in this recording. I was trying to fill some time. We'd got this far into the episode, 28 minutes or so, and we hadn't yet, we hadn't filled up our 30 minutes, which is what I usually try and do with each of these episodes. So I thought I'll take the opportunity to try and book, the first few matches of this event. And then, as I said, as I did it, I realized actually this is not quite the way I want to go. For example, this one, I think Ace Steel, Mark Henry, and Billy Kidman, and we're going to give the win to Ace Steel, I think, to go through to the semi-final. Semi-final obviously take place on day 2, as will the final of the Golden Triangle tournament. Very similar to the Super Summer Tag Team Extravaganza, actually, in that respect. But yeah, I mean, even for example, this match where we've got Ace Steel, Billy Kidman, and Mark Henry, I wasn't clear exactly how I was going to show that Mark Henry basically was going to splash Billy Kidman, and then Ace Steel was kind of going to push Mark Henry out of the ring and take the pinfall, to sort of steal the victory. So it was kind of, again, like, how do am I really comfortable with the way I've booked even just that match, let alone one or two other things that I thought were more important. Like, for example, one thing I really want to do with this event is address the heel turn we've just had with Shawn Stasiak. But the what I realized is how I booked the tournament off screen didn't really allow me to do that properly, and in the way I wanted to do it. So I just took myself away after this episode, had another think, and I think what you'll see when we get to our next episode will be that I change some of these matches. I might not actually. It will depend on kind of me sitting down with the tournament brackets and just being a little bit more comfortable that it's what I want from the show. So we'll see. But I I am anticipating that we will there will be some changes to the matches that I've booked there, and indeed we will obviously book the rest of the show on the next episode. And so pretty much that is everything for today. Apologies for the strange nature of this episode. I realize, I've been possibly talking faster than ever before. Certainly, what I've been saying hasn't necessarily related to what's going on screen. So, apologies for that. Hopefully, normal service will be revived. Is that the right word? Next time around. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.